yes, he did email me very early in the morning, and I saw it and called him, and we had some long discussion. But basically, a little bit about myself. I've been with the company 30 years, so 29 and 8 months to be exact. But so we do codification. We do it in Ohio. It's been our home. We do it all over the country as well. So we have 3,500 clients nationwide. So in Ohio, we have over 800 clients. We have 16 attorneys on staff, and our attorneys are very good at Ohio state law. So that's what we're known for, and that's what our attorneys are known for. So currently, you get from us the Ohio Basic Code of Ordinances. And the Ohio Basic Code basically is, it's basic. It is what you have to have as a village, so to be followed. So that's what you currently have. You adopt it every year and pass for that. What you don't have is your actual ordinances. So if you look up the Ohio Basic Code, you'll have that, but then you have to compare it versus your ordinances. And that's where the problem comes in with a lot of small municipalities, because they might say, well, look at the Ohio Basic Code, but then they forgot they had an ordinance on that particular subject that they needed to look at. So what we do with the basic code is we do what's called a custom code. So the custom code it's really nice. It's a nice feature. And first off, we do is we take all the ordinances that you have passed over the years, and we put it all together into a draft form. Then we do what's called a legal and editorial research report. And here's one, it's very thick, and I'll start one over here as well. But the legal and editorial research report, it basically helps your attorney, because we kind of do all the work for the attorney. We don't take the attorney's place, so you still would have to budget money for the attorney to do the codification, go through this report. But basically, we go through the report and look at your ordinances and say, hey, you have a conflict here. You have a conflict with state law. You have a conflict with case law. You have a conflict between two of your own ordinances. So that's what we're going to do in this draft, is provide you with a draft of your ordinances, what it says, and then we put in titles, the traffic and general offense ordinances. So we put that in as well and make sure you're in compliance. So we provide this legal and editorial research report, very detailed. We ask your attorney to go through, and it could be very easy. So for one might say, the site has changed, the Ohio state statute has changed. So here it is. And you just say, yes, you want to be, obviously you want to be current with state statute. But we could find an ordinance that's unconstitutional. If we do find that, then what we do is we let you know, hey, here's a model ordinance. And you can get model ordinances from us on any subject that you want in the future. So you contact us, say, hey, at the next council, we talked at this council meeting, we need an ordinance on junk vehicles. So you contact us and we'll provide that for you. So once we put all the ordinances together, we put that legal and editorial research report together. Once you have all of that, then what we do is go through it with you. So our attorney, since we're in Cincinnati, our attorney could come. They typically do a Teams meeting, but they could come and meet with you all to go through the legal and editorial research report. So like I said, very detailed. We ask you to go through it first. Your attorney goes through it, provides information to you all. We usually ask you to return it in 1 to 2 months. So it takes us 6 months to get you the draft, 1 to 2 months for your review. If you need an additional month, there's no problem. We'll give you the additional month. But the goal is to try to get this done as quickly as possible. Once you return it to us, you've answered all the questions. Any additional ordinances that you've passed, you send those in to us. We make all the changes, and then we give you one ordinance to adopt the code. So that one ordinance adopts the code. Everything before then is null and void. This is your code of ordinances. And then we put it online, make it searchable, and then as you pass ordinances, you would send them to our company, and then we do an update. We do an immediate update, so that citizens have access to the ordinances, because the citizens need to know what the law is. Because right now, they would look at the Ohio Basic Code, and then they have to determine your ordinances, and if you have 3 ordinances on a subject, they have to determine what the law is. So this allows citizens to have access. Like I said, we do this with 3,500 clients across the country. And then the other nice thing is, while you're doing this, it won't be done by the end of the year. When January comes, we will give you an Ohio Basic Code again to adopt, and there'd be no additional charge for that. So while we're doing this, you pay about $800 a year for something like that. So you would adopt that again while we're going through this, so that at least you have the traffic and general offense. We put it online, like I said. You're looking at about probably $18,000 to do a codification. That would include 5 copies of the code book, 5 binders, 5 sets of tab dividers. That includes our legal review. That in turn includes time with our attorney. Again, our attorney does not take the place of your attorney. They're there to act, to help your attorney look through everything in advance. And then the online is probably about $1,500. 1,000, it's probably about $1,600, $1,595. So I would budget $20,000 the first year. Each update, I would say budget $2,500 to $3,000 a year for future updates. The nice thing is everything will be in the code book, and any changes that you make will be in there from that point forward. And then you can budget this over 2 fiscal years. We can do 50-50 or however you want. We've done monthly before. It's really up to the municipality how you would want to do that. But what's nice about once it's done and codified, everyone will have access to the laws of the village. So the citizens will be able to see it. They'll know what they have to follow. Your staff will know what to follow and what you can charge somebody with, or if you have someone that's in charge of giving out fines or fees, everything will be in there. Typically, attorneys like us because of this, because we do all the work, kind of do the work for them. But you do still need the budget for their time to go through the entire legal and court research. And I'll leave it up for questions.
I have some.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah, I'm ready, I've made all kinds of.
Me too.
The state auditor, do they have any recommendation on how often ordinances should be codified? I mean, will we ever have to go through this again, as long as we budget the $2,500 to $3,000 a month for you guys to keep it and maintain it?
You should not. As long as you continue to keep it updated, you should just pay that the 20. And we don't know what it's gonna be each year, like the legislature, the Senate and the representatives, they might get together and make a big change. We're unaware of they're gonna make that change, and they did that about 10 years ago. Added misdemeanors and felonies in different places. So when they do that, your supplement could actually be a little bit higher. Typically, auditors, from my understanding, when people are audited, they usually say, hey, go get your ordinances codified. They get marked off for that. So this will actually, you will be codified and updated. It should satisfy that.
Because years ago, as the village clerk treasurer, we did have our ordinances codified. We hired a woman who came in, took her months, took her this summer, she was a teacher. But I don't know what happened to all of that, and that was way before online was an issue for the most part.
Well, Linda, that's great you brought that up, because one of the things we're gonna do is when this is completed, you can go online, or the citizens can go online and download the entire code from our site. So we get it back to you in Word or Word Perfect. I know you were talking about Word Perfect.
Word,
before.
please.
So we give it back to you. You can get it. There's like 6 different languages, like Word, PDF. So you can always download it from us. We kind of become a repository for you of the materials. So it will be good. It will be good to have it. And one of the nice things about having a company like us do this is it shouldn't get out of hand. So if you're updating as ordinances pass, typically what happens is our staff will contact you after 6 months and say, hey, you haven't passed anything, is that correct? And you say yes. So great, we'll call you in a year. So then in 6 months, they'll contact you again. If nobody responds or say we don't want that, staff will let me know and I'll basically come down here and see what's going on. I'm not gonna say I need the ordinances, but our whole purpose is you paid a lot of money for this. The taxpayers paid a lot of money for this codification. We wanna keep it updated, and that's the goal. But we can't just come in and.
So would every ordinance that we pass get sent to you, or only the things that would apply to the Ohio Basic Code and to the property maintenance and that kind of stuff?
Good question. So you can send us every ordinance if you want. If you do, we only put in the ordinances that are permanent nature ordinances that would actually go into the code. So if you pass an ordinance to, that's
For
not.
a village administrator?
Correct. I was just gonna say that, for the village administrator, that would not go in the code.
Okay.
But you can send it, and we will scan it and save it into our system. So God forbid there's a flood, fire, whatever, and everything is destroyed here, we would get a copy of that.
So how far back would you go? How many years would you go back?
Yeah,
As a
so you're asking a great question. So typically people go back like 20 years, but if they have an ordinance that they know that they're using from the 1960s, they send that to us. We suggest you send that to us, because we'll look at it. We'll look at every ordinance. It's just, a lot of times people don't go back and send us all the ordinances. And we ask for not originals, we ask for copies of.
Yeah, I do know that I found a binder that I had put together 9.5, 10 years ago before I left, that had all the ordinances listed by title only, from every year going back as far as I could find the books.
Mhm.
I know that it's around somewhere. I don't know how helpful that would or would not be, because I don't know if it's been done since 2015. But, I'm just trying to get a feel for how easy this is gonna be. This is a decent expense to me. Since we contract our police services out, the Ohio Basic Code as it pertains to traffic violations or what have you would not apply to us anymore, correct?
You would still have traffic and general offenses. You're asking a great question. So that would still be in the code, but your ordinances would be entwined in those. So if you had an ordinance, the Ohio Basic Code, the Ohio Revised Code had one, and then you have an ordinance that kind of does a little bit more than that, so yours would go in there to supersede what the Ohio, if the Ohio Basic, or the Ohio Revised Code gave you permission to do that. Like the legislature gives you permission to say, you can do these things. So that ordinance, if you say, oh, we want this street to be 25 miles an hour, or stop sign here, and the Ohio Basic Code says you, or the Ohio Revised Code says you can do that, then, you can go ahead and do that. Good question. Thanks. You were prepared.
I'm done. I might think of another one, so you might wanna move on.
Well, go
I
ahead.
just have experience with this, because
Yeah.
we adopted that Ohio Basic Code every year.
Right. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay.
So you had made mention that you looked through our ordinances, that currently in the book, you could try to find potential unconstitutional ordinances.
Mhm.
So that would mean that our solicitor now and or former solicitors didn't do their due diligence. True statement?
No. So,
How could it be?
because the legislature makes changes every year.
Okay.
So, you might pass an ordinance today that, is constitutional, and then because of case law or because of state changes, tomorrow it's unconstitutional.
Depending on how it's applied.
Correct.
Okay. Do these, so the ordinances is not limited to zoning, they're all ordinances. zoning ordinances such of that nature, like use of property, etc. So,
Yeah, I mean, we can put, a lot of times people do put their zoning ordinances in. And I don't know if you're asking, like sometimes there might be a zoning ordinance, and in the code book, there might be another ordinance on, you might have it in barking dogs in your zoning, and you might have it in your regular code, and they might conflict. I don't know if that's what you're asking, or,
having experience with our zoning ordinance and so forth and enforcement of them, are we just talking of zoning enforcement or all of our
I think you need to look at all.
Okay. So do they need to be codified to be enforced?
I mean, you're passing the ordinances, so you can enforce them, you just have to you've gotta be a way to have the citizens know what the law is. Like you're passing ordinances now, and you can enforce them, but you better make sure, I don't know, you might have talked to the attorney about this, but you better make sure you're enforcing ordinances that they don't conflict and that,
So what did we do in the past before we had online searchable ordinances? That the people said, hey, if I want a Freedom of Information Act, I want to see a copy of this. We would provide that.
correct, your staff would have to provide that within a certain number of days.
Right. So, that's what we did then. I mean, is there any benefit to having these, other than just the fact that the citizens can search on them?
Well, one is right now, you pass the Ohio Basic Code. And the ordinances that you pass, you have to provide those to the citizens. And you have to make sure that they're accurate each year. So if a citizen comes to you and you give out the wrong ordinance, I'm not saying you're going to, but if you possibly give out the wrong ordinance to them, that could lead to issues. So a lot of people like to use us to codify them. So each year we check state statute for traffic and general offenses and update that. So right now you're getting the Ohio Basic Code, but in the future, if you did a custom code, we would check your ordinances against state statute each year.
And I have one sample now, I am almost positive that we passed an ordinance against livestock in the village. I don't know what the Ohio Basic Code says about that, and it may have changed over the years. So we could be in conflict if we have that ordinance that we may have adopted 15 years ago. And the Ohio Basic Code now says you can have up to 20 chickens, or you can have a goat or two. That's an example of where we could be in conflict, correct?
Correct. And I'm, in all my years of experience, and I don't do the codification, but we have Ohio licensed attorneys that do that. They usually find, that's kind of what this report, and I don't know who has, I see one here. That's kind of what this report does, is it kind of goes through and it basically says,
You could have
here's
a
all
conflict.
the problems we found.
Okay.
So, and some of the issues like, and I don't know what this one is, so they provided, they have a comment here on subchapter public records policy. I'm assuming that their public records policy is not current, it's not up to date. So, what happens typically with this is you haven't been codified in a while, state law has changed, you're really not paying anybody to check that. So that's where we come in and we check it the first time, the big time, for the recodification. So we go through everything and do all of that, and so then you're updated. And then as ordinances pass, as new ordinances pass, we check it against the code to make sure it stays updated based on your ordinances. So
Now,
that's
if we
what
adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, which is different than the
Right.
Ohio Basic Code, if we adopt that, does that get put into this codification of ordinances? Or is that totally separate?
It's different, but I believe you adopt that by reference. I'm assuming that's how you adopt it. I don't know how you adopt that.
Okay, I don't either.
You adopt
I'm
it
just-
whole, but by reference. Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
available.
wondering if there's going to be conflicts with that And then conflicts with the Ohio Basic Code, I don't know.
Yeah, I do not know. I mean,
Okay.
we're just codifying your ordinances.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, okay.
Then, right now, the zoning ordinances that pertains to properties, et cetera, tall grass, use,
Our zoning
our
laws.
zoning ordinances. We're in the process, and I'll be real brief, of using Hamilton County to do kind of a gap analysis, looking at ours versus what's in Hamilton County. And let's say, for example, they gave me an example, food trucks, something of that nature, or marijuana, or dispensaries, you know, that they're adopting now, which we probably don't have. So what they would do is they would put that in ours, we would adopt that after we reviewed it and so forth, and then codify that. How does that differ than what you're doing in the sense that if we adopt all the ordinances and codify, then we're giving you more codified ordinances?
Yeah.
We're just kind of duplicating efforts.
Well, our job is to codify your ordinances. I'm not sure whatever you do with Hamilton County, but it's funny you just mentioned food trucks, because I just had somebody call me, and they said all the food trucks are coming into their municipality right now, because they don't have any ordinances on taxes and that. So all the food trucks are coming there because they don't have to pay a fee or taxes. But what we do is we'll codify your ordinances. You would have to make sure that you're not in violation of Hamilton County's ordinances as well. That's not something we do, we just codify your ordinances.
But our zoning ordinance, which is our ordinance,
Mhm.
that's not part of what he's talking about.
He's talking about ordinances in general.
Okay,
Same thing as zoning, but being adopted by reference is gonna mean that if you would use the IPMC, they could put in the, codification that is adopted, and you have a link to it, so you can look at
Okay.
exactly what you're supposed to do.
And that's exactly what we do, we will link.
you'll link our zoning code to that, as well as the International Property Code,
We can,
which will really confuse residents.
well, we can,
I know, they are two separate things, I know, but I'm referencing them both because they're separate from this Ohio Basic Code and our ordinances that we adopted together.
our goal is eventually, we actually are owned by ICC, the International Code Council. So we're trying to work it out so that, like, if you pass changes to it, we adopt it except for these changes, and then I'm not going down the rabbit hole, but if you adopt the changes, we can put them into that eventually, that's the goal. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you're talking about case law, you're talking about situations where somebody has contested an ordinance or a statute in court, and the court has looked at it and they've made a ruling, and there's actually a written, sort of like an order. It is basically like administrative law. It's not going through the state legislature, it's going through the court system. How frequently do the villages you work with have to change things because of case law?
Yeah, they do. In fact, when we do these legal and editorial research reports, a lot of times our staff will say, hey, there's an ordinance, one was a big one forever, is utility disconnect ordinance. There's a case that basically you have to give proper notice to turn off someone's utilities because somebody died, because they turned it off and they were hooked up to a machine and they needed the water and there was no water. So so that does happen quite a bit. Now, typically municipalities will be following that to see that, but we do have models anytime something like that happens. So if you need a model, you just contact us. But that's a great question.
The other thing I guess I'd like to emphasize is that when there are these updates that are coming, I believe you're probably gonna have some things written, there may be 2 or 3 options that the council can choose that are determined as legal. How does that help our citizen, because when he's on an hourly rate, which ours is, the less he has to do things, probably the better for the village financially.
Right.
So could you explain?
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. So one of the nice things that attorneys across the country love and municipalities love is this legal and editorial research report. Because you saw, I mean, you kind of looked at it, you saw how thick it is. So we basically prepare this for your attorney. So instead of your attorney having to go through this entire thing and figure everything out, we kind of look at it for your attorney. So we put it together for the attorney, and the attorney hopefully only has to write yes or no, like yes, 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 yes. There could be, where the issue would come in is if you have conflicting ordinances, one that you passed 20 years ago and one you passed yesterday, and they conflict. So your attorney's gonna have to provide that research to say, okay, what, they found this, what do we wanna do? Or the attorney, because he's your attorney, he knows the situation here, and hopefully he'll be able to come back to let you know what should be done. We also find the case law, like the utility disconnect. We're not sure what you want to do. So, if you had an ordinance that was we basically say, hey, you need to look at this ordinance because you may be in conflict with state, with case law. So that's where your attorney can then contact us, or you all can contact us with a model. So we can provide that model ordinance available for the attorney, so it cuts down the time that it takes to put that together. If that makes sense, that's a good question.
Do you need anything from us tonight on this, Chuck?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think we need to talk more about it. I would like to have our attorney speak to for a second, since he's been over at the water department, which is also where the village administrator's office is located. You've seen I guess, the folders or whatever.
Part of the problem is, with you doing codification, when you have books all over the place, and you have file folders and drawers with past ordinances, resolutions, and, I mean, they've been passed, signed, and stuck in the drawer. So it's very difficult if I'm running around with the ordinance in my briefcase for us to enforce it. So the public's knowledge of the ordinance and the conflicts with, case law that come up every day, and changes in the law, and maybe stuff that's repealed, that helps us on.
And it's nice to have the ordinances codified, because, you have a new administrator that's gonna be coming in. They need to know what the law is. If they, and I told the mayor this in our conversation, a lot of times, I've had administrators tell me they won't go to a municipality that doesn't have their ordinances codified, because they know there's probably more messes there than they wanna deal with, because they don't know what the law is, because the code of ordinances becomes your Bible. It is what you need to know, because if you don't know what the law is, how can you pass new law? It could be in conflict, and then how are the citizens supposed to know what the law is if the ordinances aren't codified, what they have to follow? And then you write them up for something, they call the village, and then somebody says, well, here's an ordinance, this is what they wrote you up on. But then they're like, wait a minute, Bob told me there's this ordinance, and they're in conflict. So that's why people codify the law, to let citizens know what they have to follow, staff knows, and it helps you in these meetings by, you have it right in front of you, either online or in books.
Now, Rob, real quick though, we used to have one binder that had one copy of every ordinance we adopted, and any extra copies or originals I would stick in file folders. So I'm wondering if that's what you're saying.
No. I'm talking about stuff that says sitting on shelves,
So
industrial.
There are binders down there.
For every
There's
year?
binders, there's tons of it.
Okay,
But
For
I
every
found
year.
a lot of other places.
okay, those are like
And
extra
those are
copies.
in disarray, there's one
Okay.
over there, there's one over there.
I had them in case someone from the public came in and asked for a copy.
Yes, and
It
the
was easy.
website actually said they could get a copy of the ordinance from
The clerk, yeah,
So-
okay, good, okay.
And I saw that, but I'm like, what this is.
I just wanted to make sure we at least had a binder for every year with all the ordinances that we have.
Yeah, this is basically about hundreds.
Okay, okay. All right.
From the standpoint of where we are right now, which, let me just say this. We are with the sheriff's department. They are not interested in mayor's courts, they're not interested in our ordinances. And I talked here previously about the fact that we are a home rule village. That falls on deaf ears. You mentioned before the fact that there's a basic code, and then there's our code, which we can go beyond what the basic code is, because we are a home rule. So, one of the things I would ask our council to think about is the fact that we don't know forever whether or not we are going to compete with the sheriff's department. And I know we're there now, and it really isn't necessarily an option to go anyplace else right now. But there are other options, I think, other ways of configuring our village in order to make sure our ordinances are enforced. I'll just give you one example. Maybe you know a village that has done this, where they have a town marshal, because that is the minimum, and they can enforce your ordinances. And then they partner with the sheriff's department as a secondary police force. Do you know any villages that
I don't, you brought that up, and I asked one of our attorneys about that, because I was coming to this meeting tonight, and he doesn't know, but he was gonna do some more research to try to figure it out. He was in some meetings the last 30 days, but he said he was gonna look into that. But that was very interesting. when you brought
There
that
were
up.
a couple of Renaissance festivals, but they were calling it the police chief,
Okay.
but that's all they had. But it's, the police chief or town marshal interchangeable.
Yeah, the other thing I would do is maybe call the Ohio Municipal League and ask them if they
I'm
know.
gonna call them tomorrow anyhow, so I can do that too.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How about the residents? You got any questions you'd like to ask?
A good example that Ohio versus village, discharging firearms in the village. It seems like the state overrules the village's past ordinances. But at one time, did Cleves belong, were they members of your group years ago?
They've done the Ohio Basic Code for many years. I just don't know how far back, if they did have a codified book.
Were we paying you all in the past, you know?
Oh, you pay us yearly, but not those kind of numbers. About the $800 for the OBC.
We've never paid them to codify our ordinances, at least the 18 years I was here.
So
And then you had the 9.5 that I had to.
was there something, had we done, we wouldn't be in the position we're in now?
The Ohio Basic Code.
It usually comes down to cost, because it's so expensive to do. A lot of villages use our Ohio Basic Code, because it keeps them codified like at a minimalist level. Like, your ordinances won't be in there. So if they pass an ordinance tonight on you can't park on Main Street, it's not gonna be in the Ohio Basic Code. You're gonna have to look at the Ohio Basic Code, and then you're gonna have to try to find their ordinance on it. That's what you have to do now. Like, if they had an ordinance on livestock, like she was talking about, you have to look at the Ohio Basic Code, and then you have to look at their ordinance, and you have to determine what the law is. So when you codify, we put all of that together, and then that becomes the law. So you know this is your ordinance on livestock. Instead of now, you have to look for the ordinance, and you have to look at the Ohio Basic Code and see where you interact. A good question.
Any other questions from the residents? Rich, I want to thank you for coming here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the input.
I will be back in touch. I know we'll probably talk at a future meeting.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim, you have a question?
Yeah, and I lost it when you said that, but you said before
$2,500 a year, and Linda said $2,500 a month.
Oh, that
Which
was
is
my
it?
mistake.
Okay,
I meant to say a year.
okay, because I,
No, that was my mistake.
okay, I just wanted to make sure that $2,500
Pick up on
a
that.
year
I didn't pick up what I was saying.
is, to stay current, seems like a small price to pay in the event that somebody wanted to sue you,
Yeah.
and that's what this is all about.
That's what it comes down to, is typically.
Okay.
I mean, people can sue for anything.
Right, but winning is
Right.
a different category. But basically, what this is all about is to protect the village legally.
Yeah.
So $2,500 a year for an insurance policy is small money.
So while you're looking at all these ordinances to codify and so forth, and it takes a period of time, how are they, I mean, are they still enforceable while they're still under review and
Yes.
so forth?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's- in
As
the
long
event that
as
there's,
they're legal.
well, that's what I'm gonna say, if there's,
We don't know if our ordinances are legal. So I think we gotta take a look at that.
So that's basically what they would do.
Because of court cases, changes in state law, all of those things have to be looked at, should be looked at regularly.
So are we saying that we can't enforce any of our ordinances for another 6 to 7 months?
that's my point, that's my point.
Don't know that answer.
And that's-
You don't know whether they're enforceable right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be enforceable. I mean, you've passed the ordinance, so the citizens are supposed to follow the ordinance that you passed. You know, we'll check it if it goes against state law. I mean, we've had some municipalities tell us, we don't care, we're still leaving our ordinance in, even though it's make them sue us, is what they told us. So, make the citizens sue us. So, that to me doesn't seem right, because that could lead to a lot of money, so. But,
Well, if you're sending letters to residents asking them to abide by your ordinance, and they do it, great.
great,
And if they don't, and then you put some kind of assessment on their taxes, and then you find out later that it wasn't legal, I think the problem will come in if we try to make legal moves to go to that. I think we can enforce our ordinances up to a point, it would be low risk. And then at a certain point, it becomes a higher risk on our part, depending on how we handle our enforcement.
and that can be any ordinance, I mean, somebody can challenge any ordinance, but they might lose.
But we'll have to defend it.
Right.
And the cost that comes with it. All right.
So,
The $2,500 a year is the insurance, I can see that, but the $18,000 that you mentioned, where does that come from the mayor's budget?
We have to figure that out,
Yeah.
Sylvia.
From the taxpayers?
That's for us to figure out based on our budget. Yeah, it'll probably be discussed at a finance committee meeting. That's for us to figure out. If we agree to do it, move forward with it. We'll have to appropriate the money somewhere for it to be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was very much.